Step number 14 is identifying future planning assumptions for each future scenario. So the previous step is about identifying or developing all these several future business scenarios. But we have not gone through into the details yet. So step number 14 is about that. It's about getting into all these details in each of these scenarios that we have identified earlier. Uh, what we are doing here in this step or in this activity is analyzing the key elements of each future scenario to see what is important for the organization and what changes should occur if the scenario is a reality. These are the future planning assumptions. And one of the benefits of having scenario and future planning assumption is that they were developed with stakeholder buy-in. So you have to talk with your stakeholders when you are doing this, when you are thinking about the details in executing these future business scenarios. So the stakeholders are aware of it, and therefore the buy-in from the stakeholder, if they are aware of all these future scenarios, the EA team will get better buy-in. Step number 15, or the fourth step of this phase, is use scenarios, program inputs, and schedule updates to drive documentation of structure components in all framework areas. This step is the documentation of the future views. Okay, the previous one is about looking into the details of the future scenarios, and this particular step, step number 15, is the actual documentation of that future views. The input needed to document future architecture are obtained from all the chief officers, the top leadership, and other managers, because they are the one who knows what are the requirements for all these future planning assumptions that we have identified. Example of inputs are the future business requirements, plan system implementations, upgrades, future workforce needed, and many others. The documentation method for the future architecture is similar to the documentation methods in current architecture. So if you're using documentation methods such as UML for the current views, you will be using the same documentation methods for the future view. But you have to bear in mind that because of you have the current and also the future, which is basically the updated documents, therefore some form of version control needs to be included in this step. Okay, so that we know this is for the current and also this is for the future, because moving or transitioning from current documents to future documents only involves the introduction or the addition of 2 or 3 entities, for example. Okay. Step number 16, which is the last step in this particular phase, is developing the EA management plan. The EA management plan is the output of this phase. The EA management plan is basically a report, a document that presents how the EA was developed, that shows the current and future views, and also describing the transition plan moving from the current to the future. Okay, the transition plans include the near-term plan and also the long-term plan. This is the activity for phase 3. write the response in your OneNote activity section, or if you are using open learning, put your response into open learning. So what I want you to do is you need to summarize the activities in this phase, and also what is the output of this phase. I think that I've mentioned to you the output of this phase. For summarizing the activities in this phase, you have to remember that phase 3 is the actual documentation of the EA. This documentation includes the current views, so any current views components needs to be documented. If the documents or the artifact has already exist, it's okay, you can maintain that. But if there are components which requires other artifacts or other documentations which was not there earlier, then you have to create that as well. For the future views, because of the enterprise or the organization has not gone through that phase yet, so we need to look into what will be the possible future business scenarios. So you would lay out all these scenarios in a story form, right? In a narrative form, you create all these scenarios in which that status quo is maintained. Or that's one scenario. A scenario which the enterprise would operate in an optimal business and technology environment. That's the second. And the third scenario will be about the scenario in which the enterprise would be in a high threat survival mode. Okay, so at least you have that three scenarios, and then you have to go into details, future planning assumption in each of the scenarios that you have already identified. So this include the details, the plans, what will be affected, what are the new documentation that needs to be created, what would need to be upgraded, and so on and so forth. Okay, and of course before you can do that, in order for you to do that, you need to get input from the top management, which is all the chief officers, the CXOs, and also the managers. Yeah, because they are the one who knows about the the business requirements, and the top management or top leadership, they are the one who knows about the strategic direction of the enterprise. So try to do that, summarize all the activities in this phase 3, and answer what is the output of this phase.